Religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology. But he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul, and the Supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. He did not happen to be a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. End of purport. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. How many people are suffering? Raise your hand. Anyone who's honest will admit, this is hell. What did Willie Nelson say? This country and western singer? Anyway, I won't quote him. It's too gross. But the idea is that you suffer and then you die. Anybody ever read, well, I doubt it, Ernest Hemingway, famous English author? He wrote a famous book called Farewell to Arms. So he said, that's what you did. You die. You come in here, they're throwing everything at you at top speed. You don't know what's going on. Everybody around you is on your case. Everybody's going through the same thing. Nobody knows what's going on, and then you die. This is life. Actually, this is life in the mode of ignorance. It's not human life, but unfortunately, 99.9% of the population, especially nowadays, not only in Kali Yuga, but in this modern society, I like to think that there are high and low tides. Even within Kali Yuga, the general progress of Kali Yuga is that it's going down. But, sometimes it's going a little bit up within that down cycle, and sometimes it goes really down within that down cycle. We see. I think it was Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He said there are different stages of any great empire. And generally we see that the symptoms of the decay of any great empire are the same kind of characteristics that we see in our modern society. Although it's not a political empire, so to speak, it's more of a social empire, or a technological empire, or economic empire. You can analyze it in different ways. But basically, because it's not dharmic, and because it's founded on ignorance instead of actual knowledge, it's not going to last, and it isn't lasting. A good test of whether something is ethically sound is the question that, what if everybody did like this? Right? And the problem is that everybody is doing like this. And therefore things are getting pretty bad. Even within the last 10 years, it's actually noticeable. It's striking, in fact. And certainly I can say, I grew up here in Southern California. When I was a boy, my parents used to take me down to the Long Beach Harbor at Point Furman. Anyone ever been there? Nice little park. It used to be nice. Now it's kind of bikers hang out there. But from there we would look down on the beach and we would watch all the seals play. There's no more seals. What happened? Kali Yuga. Within the course of the decadence of this unsustainable modern society, we've destroyed them all, or they've fled somehow or other. And if you happen to live in the Gulf Coast states right now, it's even worse than that. Because, thanks to BP. But this is the general situation with the modern society. We don't know who we are. And because we don't know who we are, therefore we've got all the wrong priorities. And what are the wrong priorities? Nunam pramatta kurute vikarma yad indriya pritaya apranoti. Na sadhu manyayata atmanoyam asannapi kleshata asadeha. It's said that when a person considers himself to be the material body, when a person identifies too much with the material body, then the demands of the body become the forefront. They're our whole concern. Whatever we spend most of our time doing during the day, well, think about it. What is it that we're absorbed in most of the time? Usually it's something connected in some way with the material body, rather than something in some way connected with Krishna. So when a person considers the body to be the self, then religious formulas, as Prabhupada has addressed here, they become more or less a formality, or as Prabhupada says, religious formularies. The real purpose is, let me perfect my God project. I'm trying to become God here. I'm trying, not explicitly, we don't think like this explicitly, but everybody implicitly, or at least unconsciously, everybody's thinking, let me become the center of all attention, let me become the controller of everything, that the supreme enjoyer of whatever it is that I want, all of my facilities. And we become completely wrapped up in that project to become God indirectly. So this is called pramatta. What does matta mean? Matta? Intoxicated, mad, really. So pramatta means what? How much? Yeah, basically. Visheshkar pramatta. You're especially mad. So we're in a society of madmen, and all of us are also mad, because we think that the body is the self. Now, when we are convinced like this, that the body is the self, then whatever the body says, we do it by hook or by crook. And religion just becomes more or less an instrument for our God project, isn't it? Religion becomes an instrument to maintain our credibility in society, or to maintain our social status while we continue with this God project. Isn't it Deva Amrita Maharaj uses that term? God project. It's a neat way to put it. So, but actually we're mad. And because we're mad, we really don't care sincerely for religious principles even. And therefore we have what we call kaitava dharma with the Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam itself calls it kaitava dharma. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, the great acharya, poet, philosopher, author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he goes so far as to say that the root of all cheating is dharma. The root of all cheating is dharma. So, and Krishna also here in Bhagavad-gita, he mentions in chapter 16, what is the characteristic of someone who is a demon, or someone who is in the mode of ignorance, rather. In chapter 14 it should be. He considers adharma to be dharma, and he considers dharma to be adharma. He's striving always in the wrong direction. And his intelligence is so thoroughly corrupted that he thinks that the opposite thing that he should be doing, that's what he should be doing. This is what we all do, actually. We are all in that mode, only. If a person is pramatta, because matta is another one of the symptoms of the tamoguna, madness, right? Should we read it? Let's go ahead. Let's skip ahead to chapter 14, because this is pretty important. In the mode of goodness, knowledge develops. From the mode of passion, greed develops. And from the mode of ignorance, develop foolishness, madness, and illusion. That's where the bookmarker was, by the way. Happened to be the very right. Pramada. Pramada means basically... Pramada is the nominal form, and pramatta means the past passive participle form. Maddened, you might say. So this is symptomatic of the mode of ignorance. And when one dies in the mode of goodness, he attains to the higher planets. When he dies in the mode of passion, he takes birth among those engaged frenetically in passionate activity, usually in this world, sometimes in other worlds. And when one dies in the mode of ignorance, where does he go?
Lower.
Lower planets.
Lower planets, hellish planets, what else?
Animals.
Mudha yoni, Krishna says, animal birth. Because really, there's not much distinction between human life in the mode of ignorance and animal life in the mode of ignorance. Both of them are mad, both of them are fully covered, both of them are concerned only with eating, sleeping, mating, and defection. In their more passionate moments, they can come up to the point of eating and mating and fighting. Otherwise, the general situation is madness and sleep. So this is the characteristic of modern society. It's actually primarily ignorant, and in its better moments, it becomes a little passionate. And therefore, America, of course, everybody knows America now is on its way down. It's the tank is empty and we're running on fumes, as I like to say. So America has some techno flash with which the whole world has become intoxicated and enamored, and in fact is foolishly following. That's proof that even the Indians are in the mode of ignorance because they're following us. Everybody's basically in this tamogun. So in its better moments, we become a little passionate, and we produce something that's very impressive, some sort of gizmo or some sort of convenience that makes things cool for a while. But because we're mad, we must commit sinful activity. It must be. It's only a question of time, but it has to be. Because we're mad. We're convinced that we're something that we're not. Like, I'm Napoleon Bonaparte. Right? This is the stereotypical depiction of the madman. He's wearing one of those funny hats and he puts his hand within his waistcoat, the way that Napoleon used to pose. So this is actually what we're doing, because we think that we are this temporary body that didn't even exist, say, 100 years ago, and will not exist in another 100 years. So the very concept that determines what's real and what's not real, that's missing. People assume that this is real, but it's not so. How do we know?
Temporary.
What does Krishna say in Bhagavad-gita? I'm thinking of a particular verse in this chapter.
There is no string.
It defines the nature of what's real and that which is not real. I'll give you a hint. Nasato vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sata. Uvayor abhidrishtontas tvanayos tattvadarshiphi. The seers of the truth, they know that of things that are real, there's no stopping. There's no end to those things. And of things that are not real, there's no endurance. Even in a relative sphere, this is true. That's why we have things that are classical. They withstand the test of time and space, and they endure. A thing's value is always calculated in terms of this principle. We're not conscious of it because the person in the mode of ignorance is not conscious of anything. He's unconscious in general. Tamal Krishna Goswami used to say that before you become Krishna conscious, you have to become conscious. So to become conscious is the mode of goodness. What's that symptom of the mode of goodness? Prakash. Krishna says, very nice, here in this chapter. Let's see if we can find it real quickly. Right here. Sarva dwareshu dehe asmin prakasha upajayate. When all the gates of this body are illumined with awareness, we're not aware. We're not even aware. Jnanam yada tada vidya vivridham sattvam idyata. When sattva is increased, then there is jnana, there is awareness, and particularly all the gates of the body are illumined. All of one's senses are aware. You're aware of it. I have a friend. He went to South India. He wanted to study astrology. So he had a question. He wanted to ask this astrologer, is it in my stars to become a good astrologer? Evidently it was, because he did become a famous astrologer. So, when he walked in, sight unseen, he had never met this person, never corresponded with this person. He had a reference from a friend, famous, I forget his name, one Jain fellow in the south, Kerala. He's from there. And he walked into this person's office, and the astrologer immediately told him what his question was and what the answer was. And he thought, how did you know this? And he said, because of the time that you entered the room and the omens that I could perceive in the environment at the time that you entered the room. So he was aware. We're not hearing what the birds are doing outside, but these things matter. They do indicate what is the karmic situation. So prakasha. Therefore, we're always advised to develop sattva guna. So we're primarily in tamoguna, and we need to raise ourselves at least to sattva guna, because sattva guna really is the human condition. Human condition in the ideal sense of that term, more than the real or the practical sense of in the practical sense of that term, as I'm describing, human condition means passionate and ignorant. But, and we used it as an adjective, we use it in that sense. But really to become a human being means to become aware. So, nunam pramatta kurate vikarma. When we are mad like this, in the false conception of life, in the mode of ignorance, we commit sinful activities that bind us to more suffering and keep us down in that misconception of life, bodily misconception. So, even Arjuna, of course, it was not in that condition. Arjuna was very pious, more so than ourselves, and yet still, it's notable, Srila Prabhupada points out in his purport, as he did not happen to be a very learned man, talking about Arjuna, Prabhupada said he wasn't even learned. He was a king. He was a busy administrator, manager. But we know that he had a lot better qualifications than we have. So, the problem is that Arjuna was very religious, but in a superficial way. Because we all, in order to set the example, at least for us, he wanted to show that we all have a tendency to become, how shall I say, just locked into this thoughtless paradigm of banal existence within this material world, in which we just carry on our daily activities without much thought of what's higher or what's even really going on. There's a very nice statement that Prabhupada makes here. He says, knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. Let's say this all together. Knowledge means to know matter and spirit.
To know matter and spirit.
And the controller of both.
And the controller of both.
So what three things are we talking about here as knowledge?
Jiva Prakriti.
Understanding what?
Matter, spirit, and controller of both.
Very good. If I had that thing around there. You all get gold star. So this is something we can reflect on, and we should reflect on this. These statements are very simple, the way that Prabhupada has written his books, but they're very profound. They're so profound. We don't know matter. We really don't know matter, do we? We're in the mode of ignorance. We have the wrong conception of matter. It's one thing to be ignorant, but it's the worst to have a misconception. If you're thoroughly innocent of any kind of any knowledge at all, that's okay. But if you have the wrong idea, that's like it's in the negative numbers. Yeah? To be ignorant is at zero, you see. To have knowledge is to be in the positive numbers, and to have misconceptions, that's in the negative numbers. That's where we're at. Even with regard to knowing matter. We don't even understand matter, let's not even get into spiritual life. We don't even understand what's going on all around us. Or within us. We're not aware, as I said. I read a book once by a famous yogi. He was describing the different processes of yoga, Ashtanga yoga. As you know, they have this, Yama, Niyama, Pratyahara, Dhyana, Ityadi, all different stages of yoga. So he was talking about each of them and going into great detail. And he was saying that, the yogi, he really concentrates, and in the practice of yoga, Hatha yoga, he practices just first of all developing awareness. He said if you can do Shavasana, right? Shavasana is what? Corpse pose. It looks like you're just lying on the ground, but there's a lot of internal work going on to do that. He said if you can just become attuned to your body and your mind in that Shavasana, then you're prepared to do any other asanas. Think about it. To be conscious of all the feeling in your toes, for example, and then in your knees and in your limbs and everything, to focus your energy like this. We heard this morning, Srila Prabhupada was describing in his purport to Srimad-Bhagavatam, tapa, the meaning of the word tapa. What does tapas mean? Tapasya? Meditation, he says. Austerity. Somebody else says. Anything else? Penance. Or? Sacrifice. Maybe all these things can kind of be crammed into that word's definition somehow. That's not what Prabhupada said. Prabhupada is quoting, actually, previous Acharya, Smriti Shastra, which says that tapa, the real meaning of tapa, is to focus one's entire concentration on one activity. That's tough, that isn't it? Just to focus your intention on anything. They call this also dhyan, as he was saying, meditation, dhyan. So dhyan actually means, just like this, especially here in Southern California, if you go into the hot sun in the summertime and have a magnifying glass and you focus that, those sunbeams are all around, the kirtanas, right? What is it? Dashashatakara-dhari, kalamashadbhang sahari, the Hitopadesh says, to describe the sun. He has 10,000 hands. 1,000 hands, actually, Dashashata. And what are those hands? They're considered to be his kiranas, the rays, right? The rays of the sun. Kalamashadbhang sahari, with which he removes the darkness of this world. This world is naturally dark. If not for the sun, it would be total blackness here, and no life would be possible, because it is by nature dark. Only the presence of the sun, which Krishna has arranged, gives anything to this world. Therefore, in the Gayatri mantra, we're appreciating the sun. Those who are chanting the Savitri Gayatri, Brahma Gayatri. So, focus. If you take the sun's rays, which are diffused throughout the sky, and bring them all together and focus them through one lens, on one pinpoint, you can burn down the whole of Southern California in the summertime. That is the power of concentration. Tapas. Tapas means burning, by the way, also. So, this is what a yogi will do. And Bhakti Yoga, we call Krishna Consciousness also is called Bhakti Yoga. It is, the principles of yoga can and should be applied, at least in my opinion, to the process of Krishna Consciousness, because it is helpful. It elevates us to Sattva Guna, which is what we're trying to do. At least we need to do this initially. Krishna Consciousness automatically, by the nature of its power, the innate power of Krishna Consciousness, automatically elevates us in this way. But it's good to remain conscious, as I mentioned earlier. Jnana. To remain aware of the process that must transpire before we get real bhakti. Real bhakti means para-bhakti. What are we practicing right now? We're practicing, we can say, Vaidhi bhakti or sadhana bhakti. That's like probate bhakti, we can say. Bhakti with training wheels. It's not really bhakti. Real bhakti actually transpires on what platform, according to chapter 18, verse 55? Anybody know? Brahmabhuta prasannatma na shochati na kankshiti samasarveshu bhuteshu mad bhakti magate param. Krishna says, we get para bhakti, bhaktin param. We get that real bhakti when we see all living entities equally. As long as we're pramatta, it's not possible. As long as we're in the bodily concept of life, we will be dictated by what my body wants instead of what his or her body wants. Therefore, we cannot possibly see all living beings equally, as long as we are not liberated. That's called pramatta. As long as we are convinced of our false identity of this material body, falsely convinced that we are this ego, or we are this mind, or this body, or the whole complex, the whole field of activities, then we must discriminate on the basis of what's going to give me profit as opposed to what's going to help someone else. That's violent. Samasarveshu bhuteshu. And na shochati na kankshiti. Because we're in a world of people who are doing likewise, all fighting each other and envying each other and vying for supremacy in this world, therefore there must be enemies at all times. Therefore we must be afraid. Therefore shochati. And we want something that we don't have because it's not what we really are. We want to become the supreme controller, therefore kankshati. That's our God project, to become the supreme enjoyer. And we're always being battered, kicked and tossed between these two poles, like a hockey puck. Kankshati, shochati, bang, kankshati, shochati, again and again and again. This is life. Therefore he said in the beginning, it's hell. Anybody suffering? Yes. All of us. We're all suffering because we have this infection within the heart, this disease of false ego that makes us mad. So Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma. When we become Brahma, that is to say, when we realize that we already are Brahma, spirit, instead of matter, then what is the nature of that spirit? Prasannatma. It is by nature jubilant, always happy, joyful. Now, don't be fooled. There are some people who have this nature in this material world as a result of the modes of material nature. That's false. It's a false facade, false front, like in the movies. Right? It's just it's a temporarily erected thing. It's not pakka, it's kacha. Right? Like in Mumbai, they have these sets. They're kacha thing. It's not even intended to be taken seriously, right? So, whatever personality we have here and now in this material world, it's not really us. We have no idea who we are. Think about it. We have no idea who we are. Whatever we see right here and now, this is just the manifestation of our previous karma, and it's a false front erected by, it's a kacha building erected by the modes of material nature for some short time, as long as the karma is there. When the karma runs out, then we change. I've seen it happen. A person can completely change. Our karma is being administered by different planets. If you get a malefic planet all of a sudden, say Ketu or Rahu, Saturn, then suddenly the person can change. Everything is just goes awry. The whole personality changes. It's possible. Not possible. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. So to become aware of who we really are, that is the primary function of human life, real human life. Human life spent, or human life is not spent. Actually, we are the ones who are spent. We talk about spending time, right? But actually, time spends us. So human life is spent by the time factor, and if it is misspent in absorption in all this useless, ultimately temporary karma, then it's cannot be called a human life. And therefore we always say, dharma sahina pashubhi samana. A person without dharma, he's considered to be just no better than an animal, because he's also in the ignorant mode still. He doesn't ever never gets off the ground in that respect. His concept is not different from the animal concept. And even though the person may be following religious formulas and may have good samskars, temporarily, I need to put that in caps, temporarily, it's just a question of time before we again become Yamaduta or a Rakshasa. I mean, we were Brahma before, each one of us. Once I was the sun. Can you believe that? Look at me now. Not shining so well anymore. And so no matter what our karma is, it goes so quickly. And in the eternal scope of things, it is really not that important. Therefore, sometimes we find here, one who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation regardless of the condition of the material body. Condition, the temporary condition of the material body. Just like Radhanath Swami was saying, yesterday morning, we just have to stay steady. Yam hina vyatyantyete purusham purusharashabha samadukham sukham dhinam so amritvayo kalpate. Krishna says. A person who is not bewildered in happiness and distress, who is steady in both, that person is eligible for liberation. And once he's liberated, then he realizes, yes, I was here all along. This is what I am. There's no problem, actually. Everybody in this room raised his hand when I asked if you're suffering. But you're not suffering. See the Achinja Vedabhed? All of us are suffering. Everybody knows, well, I'm suffering also. We're all suffering. An honest person will have to admit it, and yet we're not. Because we are not this material body. Ashocyanam vashochastvam prajnapadam shipasase. Look at me, I'm speaking Bhagavad-gita like a learned person. Still. The bodily conflict of life is there. Gatasun agatasumscha nanu shochanti pandita. Therefore, we sometimes find that the sadhus, they're a little, it seems coarse. Not coarse, but harsh. It seems like they can be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Callous. Sometimes it can seem like that. Because they're on a transcendental level. We have to learn to appreciate that, otherwise we may commit offense. So this is one of the things. Prabhupada says to have knowledge means to know matter and spirit. So we don't even know matter yet. What to speak of spirit? We're totally out of touch. Totally out of touch. And then once we have to go in order here. See? Before you can understand spirit, you have to understand matter. You have to understand what is matter and what is not matter, at least theoretically. That's what the Sankhya process is. The Sankhya program is neti. I understand that what's real, that's to say what endures, as we mentioned earlier, that's not this, and it's not that either, and it's nothing that I can see in this world. Process of elimination, that is to understand at least via negativa what is matter and what is spirit. But to understand the workings of Maya, that's also very important because we're conditioned by it. We don't even know where our enemy is sitting. Where is the enemy sitting? Krishna says in Bhagavad-gita. 3 places. Who remembers? Mind.
False sense.
Yeah.
The sense. Subtle bodies.
Yeah. Anyway, the enemy is within us. The enemy is within this field of activities that we're temporarily so much absorbed in. The enemy is within. We're sleeping with the enemy, as they say. So we don't know matter, but once we know matter, we can extricate ourselves from it by this process of elimination, Sankhya. Then when we realize our own nature, our true nature as spirit, the nature of spirit and our identity as such, then there's any question of understanding the controller of both of those. That's the Supreme Lord. So we're very fortunate because in Krishna consciousness, all these things are all covered by one simple thing, and that is by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, usually when we hear the term mantra, we think of some sort of tantric, sort of ritualistic formula it's not like that. This Maha Mantra, we call it the Great Mantra. Although it's a mantra, it's a sound formula, that's true, but it's not comparable to these other mantras because it's coming from a transcendental category and it has the power that only transcendental reality can have. Mundane power and spiritual power are not comparable. This mantra is actually not different from the Supreme Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead Krishna. And when we associate directly with Krishna in this sonic form, then Krishna himself purifies all of our misconceptions. He raises our awareness. He frees us from these false influences that so much overwhelm us when we're in the wrong association. And we usually are in the wrong association, if you think about it. What are we associating with most of the 24 hours in our day? It's not Krishna consciousness. And it's not even something or someone that's going to engender Krishna consciousness. Of course, for the devotees, we try to emphasize our good satsanga, we say, good association. But for most people in this world, everything that we hear, everything that we see, that we touch, that we eat, feel, smell, think, do, all these things will pull us down into this wrong conception of life, this bodily misconception, this pramata platform of ignorance. So Arjuna is approaching Krishna here as if he's on that level. We know that he's really not, but somebody has to take the position of the teacher here. And Krishna is instructing him that although you're speaking learned words about dharma, you haven't really realized what is the point of all this dharma. What is the point of dharma? Who knows? What is the purpose of dharma? It should elevate us, to make us a human being. That's ordinary, sadharana dharma. But then there's parodharma, the supreme dharma. That is to get us in touch with our spiritual nature and to get us in touch with the Supreme Person. the controller of both matter and spirit. That's bhakti. So chanting his name, chanting the name of Bhagavan, will affect that. In the quickest way possible, actually. We shouldn't waste our time. I was speaking of yoga earlier. We shouldn't waste our time thinking that these other processes are something somehow or other better than Krishna consciousness. The active ingredient, just like when you go and get the medicine, it'll list the active ingredient, right? So the active ingredient of either karma or gyan is bhakti, in fact, according to Narad Muni in Narad Bhakti Sutra. Therefore, there's no need for someone who's practicing bhakti, Shuddhanti tasmai brahma vishnave. He is automatically purified by the transcendental power of the Supreme Lord. He gets the results, and Krishna says this as well. Anybody know the verse I'm thinking? End of chapter 8. Vedeshu yajneshu tapahassu chaiva daneshu yat punya palam pratishtam atyeti tat sarvam idam viditva yogi param sthanam upaiti chadyam. Param sthanam upaiti. He gets the supreme position. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, from performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, we mentioned tapas earlier, giving charity, pursuing philosophical or fruitive activities. Simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme eternal abode. Now, in practicing this devotional service, the chief sadhana in this age, the chief, what we say, yuga dharma in this age is this chanting, simple, chanting Hare Krishna. It puts us in touch with our spiritual nature immediately. It's not a material process. It's an immediate, direct appeal to the Supreme Lord. Help! And he will answer. Now that famous bhajan, right? Was it? Surdas sings, Gajendra. He went to drink water in the side of the river, and he got pulled in by the crocodile, and he was he was drowning, and then he called out Narayana's name. He called out the name of Krishna, and the sound reached over into Dwarka, and Krishna came immediately on Garuda, and he took him home. See? So this is what we do. Simply by chanting Hare Krishna, we get the results of performing pious karma kandya, piety activity, ordinary dharma, and we also get the elevation that is the fruit of Sankhya or yoga, Ashtanga yoga, as I mentioned earlier. All these things come simply through chanting this Mahamantra. That's why we call it the Mahamantra. Mahamantra. The other mantras, they only have significance for a particular purpose, and usually within these three modes of material nature. Usually not even spiritual, just like there's this magazine you can get when you go to the Indian store. It's like put out by tantrics or something. And it's all about, how to fulfill your material desires and how to screw up your enemies and, all this kind of thing. It's totally fruitive, totally, basically mundane. And therefore the persons who get wrapped up in that, they remain with their sufferings. Prabhupada mentions this. A woman was walking on the side of a river with a bundle of sticks on her back, and she dropped the bundle, and then Lord Narayan appeared in front of her and said, Hare Krishna. And she said, oh, Namo Narayana. And he said, I'm very happy with your service. You please ask me a benediction. And she said, can you put this bundle back on my back? That's what our position is. You have the Supreme Shripati is in front of you, the Lord of the Goddess of Fortune, and we're asking for some paltry thing like a new Lexus. Right? May I pass my exam. May I always have good bank balance. It's such a short-sighted boon, isn't it? Someone with the scope of, with the vision of eternity, he will not do like this. And someone who appreciates just who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he'll not do like this. And that such a person can appreciate the value of spiritual life and particularly of chanting Hare Krishna. We can stop here. Anybody have any questions or comments about this important verse? There's much, 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 much more that could be said about this because it's one of the famous verses of Bhagavad-gita. But basically, we have to learn that we're fools before we learn anything else. And that's what Arjuna is getting. Lesson number 1. You're an idiot. You're suffering because